Hey, everybody, it's Constance Carter, Robert Antonin, and our very special guest, Mr. Michael V. Roberts. We are so excited to have you on today, Mr. Roberts. I followed you for years. We met at PNC, at least it had to be about 10 years ago, and I've just admired you, admired everything that you've done. I knew, in essence, kind of what you did, but I didn't know everything that you had done until I went and just did some research on you. And I'm impressed. I mean, of course, in order to have your status, in order to be a billionaire, you've had to have done a lot. But just all of the things that you've done, your negotiation skills. I got so many questions. I have so many questions I got to ask you because I'm excited. So thank you. Thank you for joining us today. I certainly appreciate it. Where are you hailing from today? Where are you at? You on your
Well,
island? Yeah, where are you?
well, Constance, you and Robert, first of all, I'm sure that those who are watching and will be watching later will surely appreciate you guys as I do, because we just don't have enough venues to bring messages from the African American community to the African American community in the
Absolutely.
United States. So I congratulate you guys for
Thank
taking
you.
the time to do it, and we will we'll stick together on this.
Amen.
This is what it will take to bring us back, which I find very interesting. Where am I today? I'm at my hotel in Detroit. I hail from St. Louis. That's my home.
Hold on, Mr. Roberts. Hold on. Did you say my hotel, as in I own the hotel? Is that what I heard? You slid it in. I just want to clarify. Is that what you said?
I am the only 100% owned African American hotel in Detroit. Uh, Same thing is true for my hotel in Fort Myers. But understand that over the years, I've owned about 12 hotels
Wow.
in cities all through the South, primarily in St. Louis. I've had hotels in Dallas, Houston, Shreveport, Jackson, Mississippi, Atlanta, um, Spartanburg, South Carolina, Memphis, and several other places.
Well, why
So
you ain't coming over to
that's been my
Cali?
business.
Come on, get you a hotel in Cali. Come on, Mr. Roberts. Come on.
Well, I do have a condo in Malibu. Is that close enough?
Okay, that's close enough. That's close
Woo!
enough.
And all four of my children graduated from Pepperdine Law School,
Oh,
uh,
beautiful.
and in fact, one went there as undergraduate, one went to USC, and then my other two, the older two, went to Morehouse and Spelman, so they were in Atlanta.
That's
So
beautiful.
we're pretty much bi-coastal for all
Okay,
practical purposes.
that's beautiful. So you are in your hotel. I talked to him before we got on, and he said it's basically like a 100-room castle. He's over there on the water. Personal chef, personal
Uh,
barber. So he's getting taken care of like he
No,
normally does.
yeah, no worries, everybody. Thank you very much.
You're not suffering
Although
too much.
Detroit is one of the epicenters for the terrible virus, and I did have to close the hotel as
Mhm.
one of the non-essential businesses that exist out here. Uh, but my hotel does sit on the Detroit River. It's the Roberts Riverwalk Hotel.
Come on.
People can Google it
Yes.
and see it. It is the premier location for a boutique hotel, probably in the well, pretty much anywhere at this point,
Okay.
given the number of ownerships that we have as black uh, hoteliers around the country.
Wow. Wow.
Mhm.
Constance, I just wanted to ask. I feel like calling him Dr. Roberts.
Well,
That's
you
gonna be
are. You have your doctorate, right? Or your
I have
honorary?
several doctorates,
well. It's gonna be Dr.
and
Roberts
including an
all
honorary.
night long.
Yes.
Well, that's fine.
So Dr. Roberts, from the standpoint of being on the Detroit River, I've been in the state of Michigan, in that area, and I remember going there. I was at a conference. I forget the part of Michigan that we were in, but I know there was so much poverty there. Like there were abandoned buildings. It just wasn't what I had envisioned in my mind when I got to D-Town. Like, I thought I was going to see gators and suits and boots and all that kind of good stuff, but there is a lot of lack that is there in that area, but I am so proud to be in the same company as somebody who's doing well, prospering, and you have a boutique type hotel right on the water. So
Yeah.
my question is, from the standpoint of of buying a whole building with 100 rooms in it. What goes into that process from a P&L standpoint? From just are you in it for the long haul? Is it a short-term flip? Like how do you approach making a purchase like that? Because you said this is like number 12.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good question. We may want to back up for a moment to how I got into the hotel business initially. I got into the hotel business because I started buying homes. When I finished law school, I moved 2 blocks from the projects in St. Louis, where I lived for 10 years, and was elected to the city council. So I was representing the hood, the roughest part of the hood, if you will. And given the neighborhood, many of the properties were beginning uh, to folks who were living there would walk away, were becoming abandoned, much like it is again here in Detroit and a lot of cities. So I started to acquire properties. Now I didn't have any money. I was a guy right out of school, so I had to use creative financing. In other words, I had to lie a lot. Uh,
We're going to use the word embellish. We're
Creative.
going to use embellish.
No, but I mean, you can take a property that you can get for little or nothing, do little improvements, and suddenly the value can be whatever you write on the paper, uh, and you can build a financial statement. Uh, my brother and I were both on the city council. He had finished law school 2 years after me, and I mean 2 years after I was elected, he was elected. He finished 3 years after me in school. So we've been a team ever since, and we've never had a job. We've always been entrepreneurs, other than the time, I guess, when we worked our way through college. Studying as an undergraduate, I was a English literature and communications major.
How did you change to law school? How did you go into the
Well,
direction?
well, as I tell a lot of folks, people think that going to law school means studying pre-law, but the reality is, law schools, just like the practice of law, is a very diversified environment. So they look for people who majored in history,
Oh
in
wow.
biology, and in other sciences. It's because they want the the concept of the legal profession to have a diversified academic background.
Right.
Now, my brother and I use that as I've instructed my kids too. That I thought that graduating from going to law school was something that allows you to think analytically.
Mm,
So as you go into business, you have a capability to get ahead of the game. We
mm,
hire lawyers and then help instruct them as to what to do. We hire accountants and give them suggestions on how to diversify their approach to the IRS.
yeah.
And so it allows us to be a little smarter, and therefore more agile to be able to do that. So as I developed a larger portfolio, and like I said, I studied international law at the World Court in The Hague, Holland, and at the International Institute of Human Rights in Strasbourg. Pretty much traveled the world, and I did that based on trying to broaden my perspective. And after doing all that, I came back and still moved 2 blocks from the projects. Where
Why?
they said for
So why,
eight.
why did you move 2 blocks from? Wait. So before we go there, let me go back a little bit further, because I think something about your history is very fascinating. So you grew up in a two parent household. Your dad worked for the post office. Your mom was stay at home mom until you guys got old enough and that you became a teacher. That's cool. What I loved was that your first business out of college was you were hustling dashikis, right? You were selling dashikis, right?
In college, I was
In
selling
college, right? So
dashikis.
you had your
Yeah,
own business
right.
selling dashikis.
I did that, but I'll take you back even further. When I was about
Okay.
12, my dad bought a gas lawnmower, and my job was to cut our grass, chores,
Wow.
whatever we want to call it.
Mhm.
And I was paid about $5. That was what I got. My neighbors on each side of us thought I did a pretty good job, so they had me to cut their grass. Now they paid $10. Uh, so one was a business and one was a job. And something clicked in that 12-year-old that said maybe
Wow.
having a business and not having a job is the way I need to go. Now, I don't want to say it was that profound, but in reflecting back, I think it had an impact on my judgment as I went forward.
Oh, absolutely. So what made you decide that, look, I never want to work for anybody. I never want to have a quote unquote real job. What made you that?
Well, I think that one of the philosophies in my book, Action Has No Season: The Secrets and Strategies of Gaining Wealth and Authority, and I've written two books, uh, is to uh, position one where instead of having someone else assign you a check, you sign your own check.
Mm.
But what
Uh,
gave you that insight? Like, what was it? Like, I don't want to work for anybody because a lot of people don't want to work for anybody, but a lot of people don't have the umph or the creativity or the drive to do it for themselves. What was that thing for you? Because it's not like you grew up in a household of entrepreneurs, right? Your dad
yeah.
worked for the post office. So what was that thing that was placed
But
inside
my
of you?
parents did some odd jobs in terms of making ends meet. They would sometimes cater for wealthy white folks or at their homes. And interestingly enough, I now live in the neighborhood that they used to cater in. And
Wow.
it's much like there's a bunch of interesting stories. We can get to them. It's just like when I bought my first project downtown St. Louis. This is after we bought an old Sears building when Sears was moving out of the black neighborhoods. Steve and I decided we would not want this 200,000 square foot facility to become, dedicated to blight and pestilence in a building that was only 4 blocks from where we were born.
Yeah.
So we
So
acquired the building and converted it into an enclosed mall, very diversified,
I know.
and it has worked since '82, I think '81 when we bought it.
You guys still own
Uh,
that?
yeah,
Wow.
and our
So,
offices are there. And mind you, that the address is at Kings Highway and Martin Luther King
all right.
Boulevard.
All
So,
right.
so by using I always say by indicating it's on Martin Luther King Boulevard, we probably know what the neighborhood looks like.
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And that I
But
want to ask you about that too.
we
I
also
do want
know that we need to make sure that it's our responsibility to change the look of the neighborhood.
that.
So we built a center, and we used our own resources when the banks wouldn't do it, when they wouldn't find us. Our neighborhood is suitable. Once we started doing the things we did, now they used to ask us to come to them. Now they have to come to visit us.
Come on.
Martin Luther King.
Change the narrative.
So Constance, let me ask. I gotta ask this, right? So there's been a broke mentality in our race for a long time, right? I know even when I was growing up, all I knew were people who were in the apartments. As a matter of fact, I told Constance a while ago that I was embarrassed to tell my friends where I lived because most of them lived in single family homes with a two-parent household, and I was raised by a single mom, right? And so my mind couldn't fathom buying a house. So all I knew was living in an apartment. But you, sir, took a building, and I know what big box operations are, and I know the cookie cutter type of building that Sears looked for, Montgomery Wards, and all the other big box. So
Yes.
how did you come up with the thought? I think I'm going to buy that building.
Well, first of all, during those days, Sears was moving out of the black neighborhoods all
Uh-huh.
over. And you can go into almost any major city and see an abandoned old Sears building.
Mm.
We
Yeah.
didn't want that to happen in our neighborhood. So we decided to move forward. Now, by this time, my brother and I were both on the city council. We were both aldermen. Neither one of us had any money. So we were able to creatively suggest to Sears, if you're going to move out of the neighborhood, you need to work with this bank and you guys need to do a financing for us uh, and give us a non-recourse loan to otherwise you'll end up with a black eye in your and I mean that literally and figuratively, I guess.
Oh,
Uh,
were you gonna get your goons? What?
well,
What's
we didn't
going
want,
on?
Your phone
we didn't
call.
want, it wasn't a threat, nothing like that.
Sounds like it to me.
It sounds like it to me too.
It's always to those who listen and determine how they can look at it. At the end of the day,
Depends on how you look at it, brother.
at the end of the day, we ended up acquiring it with that type of financing, and it's done very well. I mean, we've had our ups and downs.
Sure.
We've had probably over 50 tenants at one time in the building. We have our offices there. And
Yeah.
we built our first TV station in that
Yes.
facility.
Yes.
And once we were up and running with that first full power television station, you look up, next thing you know, we bought another 10 or 11 TV stations,
That's what I'm talking about.
and it started building. So, fundamentally, if you ask the basic question of, well, how do you go from one type of business and jump into a completely different type of business? It sort of relates to uh, being a farmer, and you have a variety of seeds. All the
Mhm.
seeds go in, but they don't all come up at the same time.
Right.
So we take on the philosophy that let's at least don't, let's make sure that we uh, are not fearful of jumping into businesses we don't know anything about, because we don't know anything about businesses per se until we get
Yes.
in and learn about them, right?
And business is business. The basics of business is pretty much the same thing. It's just learning that type of business. But when you said something that I thought was poignant, and it probably also attributed to kind of your mindset, is that your parents, I want to go back to that. You said your parents had side hustles and they did catering and different things for white people that live in the neighborhoods that you live in now. So you got to see that, you got to get a glimpse of what it was like the good life was like, right? And so I'm sure in that glimpse kind of just did something for you. I mean,
Well,
it would.
yes and no. Let me just put it this way. The glimpse I got was I had small hands as a little boy, and I could make the meatballs. I could, uh, so I had responsibilities in the kitchen, which has been,
You didn't see all the
well,
glitz and all that
hey,
stuff that
listen, I,
inspire you.
I am a down to earth brother if you haven't figured it out yet. Okay.
Got it.
So the bottom line is we really did not necessarily experience the environment per se, but what
Mhm.
we did was experience some good food.
Yeah. Well, you got that home too.
Yeah, but no, they were very protective of that kind of that relationship to do things, and I don't blame them, because they were hardworking people. Well,
Yeah.
we were exposed in our church and through our friends. We were in things like Jack and Jill, uh,
Hmm.
and a lot of the kids, their folks were professionals.
Hmm.
Uh, we were raised in an Episcopal church, a black Episcopal church, and the educational level of our church members were higher than any other Episcopal church, black or white, in the state. So I was then therefore exposed to a lot of very professional people who had their own homes.
Wow.
We always owned our own home. Uh,
Yeah.
in fact, we moved in to a ranch home when I was about 10, in a neighborhood that was virtually all white, on a street that had 14 brand new ranch homes built, and they only sold to blacks. And interestingly enough,
Really.
as I
Reverse
grew up,
property.
check this out. So as I grew up around the neighborhood, I saw all of these for sale signs popping up like dandelion weeds, right? Well, what had happened was we were in the middle of blockbusting,
Yeah. White
and
flight.
yeah, and so what happened was, even though our homes were much nicer than anything in the area, that virtual that system that did this, would go around and say, hey, there's black people moving in those houses. You need to move.
Bring down your neighbor. They're gonna bring down your value. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so even as a child, uh, I registered that. You see, and it made it for a very interesting childhood, because in my elementary school, when I transferred into this particular school, there were probably about 8 or 10 blacks at the time. By the time I graduated a few years later, it was the reverse. There was only about 8 or 10 white folks
Wow.
in my class. So
Wow.
kids, and same thing went through in my high school. I uh, I had a similar experience. In other words, so being able to deal with racial issues and understanding white folks has always been part of my mission to learn. That's why I studied mythological conventions in literature before the 17th century. I became a Renaissance scholar and somewhat of a Renaissance man, if you will.
Yeah.
because I wanted to learn more about white folks' culture than they know about their own.
Wow, I love it. I love it. For
Does that
anybody
make sense?
who's watching right now, this is the very one and only Dr. Michael V. Roberts, one of the few Black billionaires with a B in the United States of America. And I am loving every moment of talking to you, sir. This is a master class. So please share this broadcast out to anybody who's watching. Tell a friend you have a once in a lifetime opportunity to sit down with the lovely ask you, Dr. Roberts. I know we were talking about real estate, but while you were talking about your communications piece, I immediately thought of Bob Johnson and Kathy Hughes, and for some reason Clarence Avant came up in my head because during this season I've had a chance to check out some things on Netflix, and The Godfather, Clarence Avant was one of the characters that I watched, and he had a very methodical and meticulous way that he approached business in the way that you just said. We can do it this way, or we can do it another way. You decide. So
Right.
there's a gentle suggestion that
A very
we can have
gentle.
a conversation, or we can handle this out in the alley. So I
But you know,
love that about you.
you know what? And when I read about you, Dr. Roberts, you said it said that you convinced HSN to give you what $3.8 million to build a television station to receive their satellite signal, and then another $1.6 million to air their programming
That's
on your
correct.
station. Like
Yeah.
that's gangster right there. You
Oh no,
understand
Truly,
what I'm saying? That is
truly gangster.
right.
gangster. There's no question about it. It is gangster. And then I did the same thing in Denver with them. Created exactly the same type of model, and it worked out
How
really,
did you?
really well.
So that is
Uh,
the that
very
is
pleased.
that is negotiation expertise. You have
Yeah.
the gift of gab, like you, to convince somebody to give you. I want you to give me $3.6 million, $3.8 million, so that I could build my studio, and then another 1.8 so I could play your stuff on my studio. Like, how do you convince
every
someone to do
every
that?
year, and that was on a yearly basis as
Wow.
well.
How did you do
So
that?
well, first of all, I found out what they needed.
Okay.
Okay, at the time, the home shopping network was just emerging, and they were on a number of TV stations in some places. They were trying to first they were on cable, and then the cable boys saw this home shopping model and decided that they would create their own. So they created QVC and CBN and a number of they built like 30 or 40 copycat type uh, programs, shopping programs. And so some of the cable guys, Comcast specifically, started to kick home shopping off of their cable channels. So in order for HSN to come back alive again, they went out and started identifying TV stations they can affiliate with, and then use those TV stations through the must carry laws to get back on cable. And the must carry laws basically stated that if you're a broadcaster, cable companies in the market must carry you as a full power FCC licensee. So therefore, we were doing them a great favor to be able to have already owned a license, which my brother and I worked toward getting. It took us about 6 years to get.
6 years. Okay, so it took you 6 years to get your license. So you had your broadcasting company, and then it took you 6 years to get the license, or you waited 6 years to get the broadcasting or to get the license, and then you started your broadcasting company. How'd that work?
Okay, well, the company was defined as Roberts Broadcasting when it applied to the FCC for licenses.
So
Okay.
you had to wait 6 whole years before you were able to get.
Well. What happened was others applied against us. It's a competitive process, so we had to fight off the other competitors once we filed, which we ultimately did, and then we became the recipient of the license. Make
So it
sense?
took 6 years to fight these people who were fighting against you to get the
Yeah.
license, and then you were finally. So you had a lot of patience. So were you not broadcasting during that time?
Well, no, we weren't on the air. We didn't have a license until
So you just had this broadcasting company. You
we
couldn't
had
go
an
on.
application under the
Okay.
company name that was going through the FCC. You
But
follow
what
me?
made you get into broadcasting though? So how did that happen?
Well, one of my undergraduate degrees was communication arts, and my brother was similar. So somebody said a license was going to become available in the St. Louis market. Actually, the city of East St. Louis was the licensee. So and at the time there was allegedly some minority preference to getting the license. So we jumped on it. Then we were doing other things at the time, like the
Yeah.
real estate developments and a variety of other businesses. We've done over 100
So
companies.
that wasn't your primary business or primary source of income. It was something that you had in the pipeline. That's just what I want everybody to understand is that you have to have more than one thing going on. You will never become a billionaire with a B or even a millionaire if you're just focused on one thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to bring clarification to a number of things. According to CNN, our company was worth $1 billion at one point. It had $1 billion worth of valuation. Uh, uh, I I recognize that number, but I also recognize that even though I ultimately owned all the stations and was building all the hotels, and I had built a wireless phone company, it became a Sprint affiliate. That's a whole conversation by itself, which we could jump into.
Yeah, I
Uh,
know about that too.
yeah, I mean, when we sold that, we sold it for like 300 million.
That
But at the end of the day, you have to look at valuation and recognize that when a situation like 2008, 2009 hits,
right.
that your valuation can drop very, very
Oh,
quickly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And therefore, you have to be very strategic in how how you respond to a downturn in the economy, which is very similar to hopefully what we'll be able to discuss today. How do we begin to approach this economy?
Right.
You might say, what economy? Is there even such a thing as an economy today? But you've led me into a number of discussion points. So I'm one that likes to complete your thoughts and the fulfillment of your thoughts and your questions. Uh, as it relates to the timing and the process and the philosophy, there's this concept that I use frequently, and that is an apple seed. If you open an apple, you can count the number of seeds in an apple, right?
Mm-hmm.
But can you count the number of apples in an apple seed? We'll let that sink in for a minute.
Mm.
So what happens is, as you plant a seed, you have no idea, what the type of harvest, if there even will be a harvest. You have to be in a position to nurture each of those seeds, regardless of, whatever your business is. And I'll use the metaphor of the seed, which represents a business. So if I plant one seed that's called a one-time TV station, and next thing I know, I own about 12, or the same thing if I get one hotel and then I own a number of them. It's my thoughts that, if you can get into something and you feel comfortable and you can make money, uh, and know that there are times when you sell and times when you hold, we have to be very careful because frequently Black folks get all upset if somebody sells their company. Now, you mentioned Bob Johnson, for example. Bob's a friend of mine. We were getting started at the same time. He was starting in cable. I was starting in broadcast. We were within a year apart. And, eventually he sold BET. And folks, oh my goodness, we don't we don't have a station anymore. Well, what do you mean we don't have a station? He sold that because, there was a $3 billion opportunity sitting on the table, regardless of how much of it he ended up making. He knew that there was a time to make that move. He was smart to do it. And we'll see that with a variety of businesses out here we're in business, we're not trying to necessarily, we want to set an example for young folks, but we're also in it to make money and try to establish, assist in this wealth gap that exists out here. And
So Dr. Roberts, not to cut you off, I know that you were talking about where you are and what you started. I know you're familiar with the Byron Allen case going to the U.S. Supreme Court. What do you say to the entrepreneur who's looking to be where you are, to follow your footsteps, to learn the blueprint There's that word again, the R word, the racism, the discrimination, the D word, discrimination. How do you overcome those things? Because obviously it requires a great deal of capital to acquire some of the businesses that you started, just to get on board, to get in the boardroom. What do you say to that entrepreneur who says that, I can't get funding, I can't find capital, I can't find investors, I can't find partners? And obviously you've been very, very resourceful, but I know the listening audience is dying to ask that question. So on behalf of every entrepreneur,
it's a very legitimate question, no question about it. If you have the right business at the right time, you can probably find the financing. But I had to learn things. Here's a great example. It's going to be a large number that I'm going to refer to now. When it was time for me to begin to convert my TV stations from analog to digital, the FCC was beginning to require that. They were also, right around the same time, starting to emerge with licenses to build wireless phones. Now, prior to that time, we had analog phones, and if you remember, the coolest guy in the theater was the one with a telephone in a suitcase, and snap, crackle, drop sound to it. So I saw then that we should position ourselves as to go after licenses. We did. Long story short, we ended up with licenses for half of the state of Missouri. Our motto was to try to get licenses close to our TV stations and then use our TV stations to promote our phone company. We also knew that branding was important. It's just like when we did the Home Shopping Network, and eventually we went to UPN. And by the way, we were one of the few stations in the country that aired Byron Allen's programming early on. He became a friend, and we knew him.
Yeah.
So we recognized that this future PCS, we call it, the cellular phones as we know it today, was coming. And so we decided, well, since we were familiar with...
How did you know? How do you know these things are happening?
Well, okay, how did I know? Remember, we had gone through an FCC process to get a TV license, right?
Yeah.
So we had a relationship or an understanding of the FCC, and we became engaged with the FCC, especially during the time of when we were fighting to have the must-carry rules protecting broadcasters to get on cable. In fact, that was political lobbying that Steve and I both were politicians, so we understood that language. We could go into Congress, we could go into the FCC. And frankly, that resulted in the Home Shopping Network placing me on their board of directors. I served on at least 3 public boards.
Having a seat at the table. You see how important having a seat at the table is? Then you can become a real decision maker.
That's right. And we could pull people along, and a lot of folks didn't know how to get on home shopping and how to work that process. I had to, I coached a lot of people during those days. So back to how we got to know about the licenses that were coming up again, is because we had a relationship with the FCC. Others had watched closely. We became the only Black firm to ultimately make this happen. We went over to Sprint, whose offices were in Kansas City, across the state. At the time, Steve and I owned 2 private jets, and we loaded up our engineers on our jets and flew over. Did you see how I dropped?
Wait.
I caught it.
Come on, don't let that
Robert's aviation on
private jet. What did he say? He said
2.
What's better than 1 private jet? 2.
So we flew over, we met with them, and they told us that they wouldn't be able to affiliate with entrepreneurs. They were only doing it with rural telephone companies. Now that's to build, again, a wireless cell phone company, right? So we just looked at them straight on, and you talk gangster. Here was the gangster move. Well, I'm sorry that your board feels that way. As you can see, we're successful in doing what we do, and we're going to build ours out. And first to market will be the ones who will probably hold the customers when it's all said and done.
Come
So
on.
let me call my
Gangsta.
pilot. Let me call my pilot and start my engines. And come on, engineers.
I'm gonna throw my phone at the screen. If you don't cut it out right now.
So Stephen, our group, we left, and check this out. A month later, they came back and they said, "We changed our policy. We
Mm.
want you to be our affiliate. In fact, here's a map of Missouri and the area. Just take a pencil and draw what you want." Man, I drew the whole
Wow.
state of Missouri, southern Illinois, a little of Kansas, and Oklahoma, and Arkansas. And that became my
Wow.
footprint.
So you had the 8th largest tower company in the nation
Now
as a
you move,
result.
now wait a minute, you moved too fast.
Oh, so that wasn't the tower company. Okay.
No, we're
That was,
talking
this was
about
the,
owning
this was the
a.
broadcasting.
We're talking about telephony, telephone business.
Okay.
We built a phone company.
Oh,
The
you built.
wireless phones that you have now, we built that in Missouri. Okay. The process of building it also included building towers, right? Just
Right.
like towers for TV stations. So we understood the tower business, right? So, but what we didn't realize was it was going to take $100 million to build this. So I would put my little program together, go up to Wall Street, talk to the boys, tell them I want to build this, I need the money, and frankly, they would laugh so hard that they'd fall out of the chair, and
Wow.
I'd have to go
Yeah.
pick them up and put it back in. Why? Because they didn't know anything about. They only knew analog phones. They didn't know that this whole new digital phone process was coming.
Yeah.
But you know, that's the vision thing. So I was still trying to figure out. Now that I was with Sprint, the cost dropped because of they had spent about $10 billion building the big cities, so I could use their same buying power, and as a result, it dropped ultimately down to about 53, 54 million. And we sold some TV stations at the time to help in the process of keeping us afloat. And one day I was at an affiliate's golf outing, right? Of course, there's no other, we're the only blacks involved with this business nation at this point. And so I asked one of the other affiliates, well, how do you guys finance this stuff? I mean, it seems kind of hard. And that's when I learned, and here's to your question of how do you get financing on things, that there was something called vendor financing. Now,
Put that in the page, y'all. Vendor financing.
vendor financing. Now, let me explain that. Uh, the primary vendors to supply antennas, base stations, all the equipment to build a facility was either Lucent, Nortel, or Motorola. They were
Yep.
competing for the business. Nortel thought that they had us locked, and I went to them and I said, "Hey, well, tell me about this vendor financing." "Oh, we do this." I said, "See, I didn't know anything about it. It's just that I was curious and I would ask questions." So I've got the people their hold card, and Nortel was telling me that they would do 50% financing, and we would have to come up with 50%. But that still was $25 million, more or less. We didn't have it. So this golf tournament was sponsored by Lucent, and I happened to be in the same condo complex with the regional director, the national director actually, but he had Missouri of Lucent, and I said, "Hey, I know Nortel built St. Louis and Kansas City, but how would you like to have the rest of the state of Missouri?" Man, they jumped on that. They gave me 100% financing.
Oh my God.
Ooh. So,
And,
so, so,
and
Dr. Roberts,
uh-huh.
because you dropping so many bombs and nuggets that the people in the back may not be catching what you are throwing out, and I know that you are a master negotiator. Now you make all of these things seem like they're happenstance, but there are certain conversations, there are certain times, there are certain keywords and key people that you need to know with relationship building and all that kind of thing. But in the midst of your answer, I need you to drop like 3 killer tactics that you can use, especially for the benefit of the entrepreneurs, because obviously it's not every day that we're an alderman on the council. It's not every day that we have a relationship with the FCC. Not every day that we own 2 jets. But there has to be something here for the remedial folks out here that are looking to have the tactical knowledge about how to even negotiate and have these kinds of conversations. Because to even be on the golf course, that's a sacrifice and a monetary donation. And to be in a boardroom, that's a necessary tactic.
But I didn't start there.
How are you having to do
But
that?
I didn't start there. I built that. You see, now in my book, Action Has No Season: The Secrets and Strategies to Gaining Wealth and Authority, I do a whole chapter. I do an entire chapter on negotiations.
Okay.
So people have to read. Now,
Sure.
The way I mentor, I can't. I give speeches and all over the country, right? I mean, I know that a lot of folks don't know Mike and Steve Roberts. I understand that. But there's a reason. It's because rich people scream, but wealthy people whisper.
Whisper. That's right. Say that again, Dr. Roberts, please.
Rich people scream, bling, 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 but wealthy people whisper.
Whisper. Yes.
So, one of the great things of strategy is this.
Being quiet. That's what I picked up from you. Because you were willing to walk away. And then they called you back. And that's a huge part of negotiating. You got to be willing to walk away.
That's right. Don't negotiate against yourself.
Yeah.
Learn when to, and then learn when the offer is reasonable. Now, I mean, deals may not always be. In fact, most deals are not 100% of what you want or 100% of what they want. That's the art of a good negotiation, where both parties can come away with something reasonable.
And their dignity intact. Because a lot of people think a negotiation is win-lose, lose-win. But it could be a win-win for everybody. You could be the other person doesn't have to feel naked, doesn't have to be beat up, black-eyed, bloodied, in order for you to feel like you've won something, you walked away with something. That's how I look at it. It should be a win-win. Both people should leave with dignity on the table and feel good about working with them in the negotiation.
I'll say this: all of what you said is true until them Roberts boys walk into the room, Stephen and Michael at the same time.
Yeah, well, we have.
Your answer needs to be yes or yes.
Followed by 6 of our kids who are all lawyers, right?
Right.
But like in a negotiation, here's an example. Constance, let's assume you have a car and you're trying to sell it for $1,200. Okay. Now, in your mind, once you decide to sell it, it's almost a hassle because you don't really want it anymore. I walk in and I say, Constance, in front of you is $9,000 cash. And you're saying, well, but I want $12,000. I think it's worth $12,000. Okay. I offer you $9,000 because that's all I have. I have no more. Now, what do you want to do? Okay. At that moment, you're looking at that $9,000. And as far as you're concerned, that's your $9,000. But I still have $9,000. So when you tell me you can't do it for $9,000, I pick up your money and I start to walk out the door. What are you gonna do?
I'm gonna get my money back.
Wait. Let's talk about this.
Yeah. Can we talk?
Yeah.
But see, that's what negotiations are strategic. Money talks, and folks have to be positioned to. I don't want to use the word bluff necessarily, even though that's part of it. But you sometimes have to really present your case based on where you really are, and if the deal doesn't work, and I've had many deals that didn't work, we had to step away from them. Many that I could have gotten more than I had,
Sure.
and then some that are, but everything is a tax play also.
Right.
You see, you have to be very mindful of how you structure your deals because you can get hit with very strong, IRS taxes. And
Right.
one of the reasons we bought the planes, you see, you didn't ask that question, is because what I learned was they have very rapid depreciation,
Oh
and
wow. Okay.
you charter them out, and then what happened, and that's what folks do.
And you can write off the depreciation.
You write off the rapid depreciation. You charter it out so that Tom Joyner used my G3 for a year, for example. Uh, you charter it out. You let you bring in resources. So it really is a business. It's not just some little toy.
Tax right, but more importantly, it's a tax write-off.
Exactly. And,
Mhm.
and then you, at the end of the rapid type, you sell it hopefully for almost what you have in it, and then you start over again. And that's it's a business. That's why you see
That's game, you guys.
NetJet and these guys out here with ownership.
That's game right
Yeah.
there.
In
That's
fact,
that
yeah,
right there.
we didn't really play. The times we used it was usually to fly to the Bahamas to our island
Yeah.
and hang out down there. That's. I'm sorry.
Wait,
Did I do that
wait, wait,
again?
wait, 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 wait.
Wait, did I do that again?
Use it to fly down to your island.
Yeah. Well, it's Nassau, but we have a
They
property
have
called
their own
Robert's
island.
Island.
They have
Robert's
their own
Island
island.
side of the complex. Something but that's a real estate deal. It's an offshore real estate deal, and it has a specific tax purpose, and it has it it means that when we go there, we're doing our business because we have a business there. So that trip becomes a write-off, doesn't it?
Listen, y'all on the feed. Let me tell you, y'all paying more taxes than Michael Roberts. I'm just telling you that right now.
Well, let me just say this. One year we paid 14 million in taxes each.
Ooh.
Each.
In fact, we did it twice, I think. But that's why we look very carefully at transactions. Now, mind you, when these things hit, as powerful as it may sound, it doesn't take much for you to lose everything.
Mm.
Because what can happen is when you have a downturn, and this is equally important to discuss, how to protect yourself on the downturn and be comfortable in not being in the same status that maybe you were even 6 months ago. Let's
Sure.
face it, let's look at everybody on the planet. Where were you 6 months ago and where are you today?
Yeah.
But I would say this to black folks, just stop and catch this for a moment. If everybody, what is it, with 30 million black folks in the United States?
Mhm.
Is that about right?
Yeah.
And let's assume 25 million are adults, just to pick a number. And each will receive $1,200 this week. How much money is that's going to jump into the black community?
Probably less than zero.
No. Listen carefully. Everybody's going to get $1,200, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Times 20 million people.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
I did it times 25 million.
Okay,
25 million. Do the math.
Okay.
That's $25 billion.
Yeah.
That's going to hit the black community at one time.
Mm.
This week.
25 billion. Yes.
This week. Now the question is, what are we going to do with it?
Collectively, what are we going to do with it?
Mm.
So let's go into that for a moment. It would be great if we had businesses that we could immediately invest in or purchase items from.
Write this down.
To make sure that if you're going to buy my book, go to a black bookstore and buy it.
Yes, sir.
If you're going to shop, try to find a black store to shop with that money.
Mm.
But here's some suggestions on how to invest it. I think the first thing you should do is maybe write down your credit cards, because on the back end, your credit card is kicking you with a very high interest rate. Now, once
25%.
you write down the credit card, you can still use it as if it's the part of that cash.
Yeah.
But you protected your back end by writing down or paying down your credit cards. Then, if you have money left over, I would say that there's basically three areas to think about investing in. The stock market, a little of that would be nice. Um, the look for blue chip type stock. You don't want to act like you know your way around the stock market. Uh, it's like you might play basketball, but you can't play in the NBA.
Right.
So what you
But
want
stay
to
away
do?
from the high yield is what you're saying. Stay away from the high yield stocks.
Yeah, well, find stock where there's dividends that's probably paid, because more than likely that's a company that has a good business model and a very strong high-end leadership and management.
For example, what's a blue chip company?
Pepsi is one that seems to be very interesting for a lot of folks right now. Uh, 3M, as you know, they're making a variety of the necessary hospital issues going forward, the masks and things like that. So I would suggest people talk to their brokers and discuss with their brokers the what are the reliable, dependable stocks. Since the market dropped so low, is my point. It's coming back, but at this point, it's still not a bad investment. I looked at Disney, for example. Disney has always been extremely strong, but it dropped because who knows when you'll be able to reopen the parks. But they're going to reopen them,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's going to probably jump back pretty strong. The next area would be real estate, which you guys are very comfortable with. Look for those opportunistic purchases that are out here. There are going to be folks like in 08, 09 who will lose property because of failure to pay their mortgages. They've not been able to work. And the stimulus is out here. It's going to only be, so successful. So there's going to be some real pushback at some point by the banks. They may give some forbearance and help some people, but there'll be, I think, the property values are going to shrink. So we have to look at that, and property is always a great investment.
Always.
And the next last one I would think is something that a lot of people have to bite on, and that is cryptocurrency. To own a little bit of a Bitcoin.
Can you buy a piece of a Bitcoin?
Sure. A Bitcoin is like stock. It's just a number. There's no. I mean, a Bitcoin is not a real coin. It's not like that. It's a number, and you can have percentages of it. See, there was only about 23 million Bitcoins actually created, and that's it. So what'll happen is, it'll be segmented out ultimately. That's how, if, for example, I wanted to buy, if I have a Bitcoin that's worth $7,000 today, and I want to buy something that's worth $3,000, I can buy it with $3,000 worth of that Bitcoin at the value of the Bitcoin.
Right.
You might say, well, how does this work? Well, let's figure it out this way. The U.S. dollar is a fake form of currency, right? It's a fiat. Okay. The euro is fake, but it's paper. Now, the world is still, 70% of the world still bases its valuation against the US dollar. So it has value, of course. But if you think of all of these different currencies all over the world, in the future, and I'm a futurist, don't get me started in robotics and artificial intelligence and machine learning. I do a whole chapter on that on my newest book, Action Has No Season 2.0.
2.0.
Action has they asked for it. They asked the name of the book in the comments box. Action Has No Season
2.0.
2.0.
Mm-hmm. And it, I do an entire chapter on futuristic business and opportunities to help our people begin to get comfortable with that. And one of the things we have to learn is, things aren't going to be the same, not because of the virus, it's because we're moving into a digital environment.
Right.
If you take, for example, these phones that I built years ago that we currently have, there's more data capability in your hand with that phone than what NASA had when it launched a man to the moon.
Wow. Say that one more
But,
time. Say that one more time. There's more technology that we
there's
have in this phone, more advanced
data capability in your little phone than what NASA had with all its computers when they sent a man to the moon. Now, just think of the last time you really try to remember somebody's phone number. We all go to that, don't we?
Yeah.
And so we're seeing that these nano chips are beginning to develop out with an incredible amount of data in a small little chip. And from a health standpoint, what I think we're going to find in the future is that these chips will be implanted in us, and it'll send us signals that'll discuss, the status of your DNA, and that DNA data will help us understand: are you going to be prone toward cancer? That would be true probably in a fetus, where we could actually look at where the future of this child, and be able to clip certain negative components of their DNA, so that when they grow up, they'll be okay. Now they're already making human parts. The human dies because one of your functioning organs gives way, but in the future they'll just make another one and replace it, and you'll be up and running. So imagine this in the future. You're going to have these chips in your brain and in your body, and you're going to look at a mirror and you're going to say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, what's wrong with me?" And your mirror is going to develop an analogy, and it's going to send that data to the RoboDoc office. The RoboDoc will do a complete analysis faster than a human can do it, determine what's wrong, and then send the prescription to the robo-pharmacist. Robo-pharmacist will then develop and package the medicine you need, and then they'll call the local drone company, who will then in turn fly your medicine to your house, and your robot will take it, bring you water, and put you to bed. If you are 2 years old today, it's unlikely that by the time you're 16, you know how to drive. And the reason you won't know how to drive is because cars you will not drive a car, you will command the car. So we're going to see vehicles that'll be moving around. In fact, it might be illegal by 2035. It might be illegal to even drive a car.
That sounds good to me. I hate driving.
So when you have these, we're looking at how we're being trained now. These virtual reality masks, goggles, and you can feel like you can skydive or scuba dive. Now imagine being able to, where they'll put a chip in your brain and you just close your eyes and you get the same virtual reality.
That's scary though. That's kind of scary, Dr. Robert.
I mean, I'm just saying that the whole concept of being a cyborg, it becomes really, when do you become almost a robot in part and a human? Now remember, the robots really won't. Artificial intelligence won't really be able to do certain things. Only the human can love, can hate, can feel. Robots will be able to simulate some of these things, but they won't be able to have the same emotion that the human. It's just that we have to recognize that there's some dark sides of this. You said it's scary. Well, I'm gonna really scare you. What would happen if you have a chip in your brain and now you have infinite knowledge? And your body parts are such that you can be replaced and you can live a much longer life. And what's going to happen if 50% of the jobs that are currently held by people who handle any kind of job that is hands-on, that requires repetitiveness. Uh, what happens when all those jobs go away because of robotics? Uh, what happens when you have these body nanochips that you're kind of enjoying and all that, but suddenly there's a brain hacker, a criminal, who suddenly puts you in a position where you don't even know what you're doing? That's the dark side. That's the scary side.
Wow.
So this future has a very interesting group of challenges and business opportunities at the same time. The examples are, there was at one time people would pick cotton for the textile industry in the South, and then came the cotton gin, put people out of business. They were picking with their hands in a repetitive fashion, and the cotton gin took it. So what did they do? They came up to places like where I am now, Detroit, and worked at the automobile industry.
Factories.
So as one technology moves jobs out, others open up jobs.
Right.
But what's happened to the jobs here? The assembly plants are now robotic arms, aren't they, for the most part?
Now what?
Yeah.
And
So real quick, Dr. Roberts. I mean, you have dropped so much. I just need to acknowledge some of the people out in the feed who are watching and listening to the Dr. Michael V. Roberts. What's happening, Tim Goller out there, Lester, Right Group, and also Denise Dixon. Hey, Candace Dancy, Felicia Ferguson, and Dr. Roberts. I've got one for you. Nia Jordan has asked us about the 5G towers. There's all sorts of negative media out there right now. And you talked about AI being the future, not maybe, not possibly, but it is futuristic. It's happening now. So where are you? You seem to be plugged into a lot of data information. Is it fake or is it real? What we're seeing about the 5G towers in our community, specifically like a place like Baltimore.
All right. First of all, let's be clear. A tower is just some steel up in the ground, up in the air. Okay. So what you're really referring to are the antennas that are sending signals.
Yes, sir.
In order for 5G to work, it requires more towers in a closer proximity because the data is going to be so robust. The data in 5G, in comparison, a 4G, for example, is like data coming out of a garden hose. Okay, water coming out. 5G is like a river flowing at you, and but that's the data. That's not necessarily the transmission signal. The transmission capacity is about the size of a transistor radio. So I hear all the theories, and I hear people talk about it. When I was building my wireless company, we were at 1G and 2G, and I was asking the same question. Should I put this phone next to my ear, and so on and so forth. And we have alpha, beta signals. We have transmission signals coming through us. Every TV station, radio station, everything you're in a car and you get all these signals coming at you. You're just walking around. Even as we speak, that's all hitting us now. But it hasn't affected us as humans. So, my opinion, I don't see 5G as being, one of the main reasons why the COVID-19 is all over us. And I've seen people react. We just need to calm down on that and understand that actually 5G is going to be something that's going to provide a tremendous amount of data. It's going to come to us, and it's coming. It's going to happen. Now, if you want to make some money, learn how to build another towers in your community and other places, and
get that vendor financing. Get that vendor financing.
Yeah, let the vendors finance it, right? And the users, it's basically vertical real estate. I mean, when we were selling our TV stations, we realized that the buyers were just people who wanted the spectrum. Yes. So we're builders, so we built towers and office buildings. So we kept those and leased them back. And Constance, to your point earlier.
So maybe we should figure out how we can put our $1,200 together and build some towers in our neighborhoods.
Yeah. And get because what you're going to have are tenants that are going to pay 12, 14, 1500 a month. Listen, I had, like you said, my brother and I was the largest non-public tower company at one point, over 200 towers. And when you drive by, you look at them, and you can only, for us, we only heard one noise, and it was cha-ching, cha-ching. I mean, I mean that was what we heard. We didn't see anything else.
I love it.
I love it. I love it. Dr. Roberts, I don't want to let you get away because, I mean, for an hour straight, you've been giving us a master class. We did not touch on politics. I know that you when I read your backstory, you were with the Carters, Jimmy Carter. So, I mean, is it important for us to be plugged in to the political legislative process? Is that a valid area that we need to explore as a race, as a people?
Well, there's no question we have to, one, get our census numbers where they need to be. So we have to make sure that our family, friends, and everybody's filling out the census tracts, because it is through the raw numbers uh, money comes into our communities, block grant funds, and the rest. And that's pure. It's only math. So we have to make sure that that happens. Uh, the when I had just come out of school. In fact, I hadn't even been elected yet when Jimmy Carter was announcing he was running for president, and it was Jimmy Who back in those days. And I connected with him. He was a nice guy. He ended up being president of the United States, and I ended up at the White House on a regular. But I was like, I'm here. I'm playing tennis on a tennis court. I'm playing tennis with Hamilton Jordan. I'm winning tennis tournaments. I was a semi-pro. And then next thing I know, I frankly didn't know how to capitalize on that. I was too young at the time. I mean, I was learning.
How old were you?
26, 27.
Um,
Wow.
So then, of course, since then, every candidate running for president on the Democratic side has, I've met or been involved with, did fundraisers for and helped out. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens this year. And I'm looking forward to a robust campaign before it's over, even though it's going to be a different kind of campaigning.
Sure.
It's going to be like this.
I've never seen it before. I'm sure.
We're gonna have to see, how we pull together. On a local level, yes, it's all politics really is local.
Sure.
So in the real estate business, you need to be able to do like I did, for example, here in Detroit. When I came up here and bought a building, I got my political visa in order right away. Met
I
with the
love it. I
mayor,
love it.
made sure that I could get my taxes where they needed to be, real estate taxes. I needed to find out what were the resources that were available at the time. I mean, it's again in the art of the deal. It's in one of my books. I realized that the building was closed when I bought it. So if I left it closed, for example, on December 31st, and deeded it to the Detroit Land Bank, and they became the owner on the 31st, which is the assessment, and then it came back to me 2 days later, a week later, I didn't have to pay taxes for a whole year. And then I learned that they had a thing called the Turbo Program, and I jumped into that. And the Turbo Program, for 5 years, you get 50% of your taxes rebated back to you. And then I recognized that if I write the purchase of this property up correctly, then here's how it would work. Here's an example. Let's assume that you're buying something like a hotel for $10 million, just to pick a number. Then when you write up the contract, you think, well, all these things in a hotel, you got personal property like crazy all over it. So I'm going to make 50% of that purchase price personal property. And I'm going to make 30% the building and say 20% the land. The land is not depreciable.
Right.
The building is depreciable at $3 million, right?
Mhm.
But the personal property is a 1 year depreciation, 3 years at the most depreciation. Bang. half of the purchase price can be written off in taxes if you have income that you need to offset it. Makes sense so far?
That's why
So
you
then you
this.
go in,
It makes plenty of sense.
then you go into the assessor's office and they say, well, the building is worth $10 million. No, 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 no. Hold on. Here's my contract. I just bought this building for $3 million.
That part right there.
You
That
with me?
part right there. Yep.
I'm with you, lockstep.
Okay. And so you lock that in, and then you try to get, uh, uh, there's a lot of things you can blend in, and that's where politics helps because you get to know, in the city, the city councilman, the mayor, who the economic development people, find out what are the resources that are available, and then you take advantage of those resources. They're there for that purpose. They are incentives
I,
You know,
I,
to
I,
get
I'm
you
sorry.
as a business person to buy.
I just bought a commercial property a couple of months ago, and just exactly what you said. The county assessor called me and he was like, "You bought it for this much, but the comps are here. How did you get it for this? You bought it for $100 a square foot, and
Mhm.
it's really $250 a square foot. How did you get this for this price?" And I said, but there. So he said, "Well, send me over your appraisal because the appraisal came in at what I purchased it at because he was going to try to assess it at
Sure.
what he thought the value was, and then therefore my property taxes would have been based upon what he thought." And I was like, "Gladly, let me send you my appraisal right away because I definitely do not want to pay more taxes than I have to." So I definitely get that. And all of the personal property, definitely. I didn't realize I did actually. My CPA does that with this stuff, but I do have a lot of personal property there that I'm going to make sure that that is depreciated when we get our taxes as well. When we do our taxes as well, but we can't do the land. It's very interesting. I say I don't know a whole lot about taxes, but I do know certain things that are depreciable expenses, and certain things aren't. So that's very interesting for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
I love it.
Well,
This is an
I'm not here to
absolute.
give accounting or legal advice. I'm only telling you things that I did. Okay. So
I'm
I
taking
don't
it.
want everybody to hold me to it in
Just the
any way.
disclaimer.
Exactly.
We have to do that too as real estate professionals. Do not take what I'm telling you. I'm not a CPA. I am not an attorney. Put that disclaimer
Right.
out there.
Well, listen, Constance, I mean, we have had so many positive comments in the feed. I mean, this is a masterclass in at its finest. But, if you're ready to kind of like take your collar off a little bit and loosen up, Dr. Roberts, we have
Oh,
some questions
that's
that we'd like to ask you because we have inquiring minds that want to know. Now, the nature of how this works, this is our rapid question round. These are off-color questions, right? They're questions you can certainly answer. There is no wrong answer, but inquiring minds want to know. So I'm going to start it off, Constance, with the very, very first question. But before I ask my first question, Dr. Roberts, are you game?
100%.
All right. So
audience.
there
Are you
are
ready?
presidents. Yeah. Audience, please play along and participate. There are presidents in the land. You have been connected to the White House and several administrations. If I heard you correctly. And you never want to choose sides or pick favorites. But if you had to, if I put you on the hot seat right now and I told you, got to give me an answer, who are you going with? William H. Clinton or Barack Hussein Obama?
Clinton. No, I'm joking. Obama's my man. Obama's my guy.
Can you give us a why or there needs to be
Yeah.
no
Why?
explanation?
I
Well,
go for Obama.
the reason, first of all, I say it because he has the temperament to handle the type of epidemic issues we have today. He has strong understanding of the system and would be able to, in my opinion, guide us as a country through this very difficult time, both from a health standpoint and from a economy recovery standpoint.
I
Absolutely.
love it. I love it. It's interesting that real quick, Constance, before you ask your question, a lot of the people that I consult and I work with in the corporate world, they were not big fans of Obama because they said it was hard to do business during that time. And they have every reason in the world why he wasn't a favorable presidency. But it's interesting to hear you say that because you have so much business acumen and so many assets. It's interesting. Your answer is like I hear a lot of people say I'm a Democrat at their heart, but I got Republican money. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that before, but it sounds silly to me.
I love it. I love it.
So
Unapologetic.
Ayana said Obama. Nia said, I'm so glad he said Obama. Um, Felicia said Obama. James Moore said Obama. Candace said we sure could use Obama's voice today. Um, Nicole Nichols Robertson said Obama as well. So we don't have any that said cooking.
Well, you know, it, don't we miss him?
Lord, don't we miss him? Lord, don't we miss him?
Don't we miss him? You know, yeah.
You up, Constance? I know you got a hot seat question for Dr. Roberts.
All right, so
Okay.
I'm gonna go with music. All right. Now you live in Detroit, and that Detroit is the home of the Motown sound. But I'm not gonna ask you a Motown question. I'm gonna ask you this: Patti LaBelle, Aretha Franklin.
Ooh.
Aretha?
Why?
Well, one, I met her, I know her, and I think that her music transcends from pop, soul to gospel. I think her range in throughout the years has been one that has led to respectability. Uh, all of her music has been almost anybody can listen to her music, uh, and do still today.
Yeah, yeah.
I attended her
Queen.
funeral. I attended her funeral,
Oh,
and
wow.
she was a well loved a person. Now Patty, of course, is always interesting, especially when she kicks her shoes off and sings her numbers. Uh, but so I'm not really putting her down in no way. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
I'm just saying that Aretha was always dressed well, always very respectable, and she was in private life a very interesting woman and a character in many ways.
Wow, wow. Dr. Roberts, there is no apologies for these answers. There is no wrong answer. And I promise that I will not tell Patty that you said she was number two.
So
So for the benefit of all the saints that we have on the feed right now, for the benefit of all the saints, if you had to choose mega church or small little storefront church, where do you feel most comfortable? Mega church or small church congregation?
I like mega churches.
Okay.
I'm on the board of directors of New Birth, which is one of the mega churches.
oh yeah.
In fact, when Bishop Long died, Tommy Deutsch and I were the only two members of the board left. We had to choose between 138 applicants to replace
Wow.
him, and we chose one of the baddest brothers going.
Jamal.
That's right, Jamal Bryant. And Jamal is, you see, you wouldn't see a Jamal Bryant in a small church. Okay. So if we were to consider a small church, the intimacy between the pastor and the congregation works very nicely. Okay. But if you look at it from a megachurch perspective, and you look at, you know, who are the megachurch players out here, like T.D. Jakes and others, uh, they have a voice that can be heard outside of the congregation.
Yeah.
And if you take someone like Jamal Bryan, who's my good Kappa brother as well,
That's right.
and I helped hire him to as the uh, new senior pastor at New Birth. Now, I mean, he's global.
Yeah.
He put out a piece.
Bad.
He put out a piece today attacking the governor of Georgia for opening up massage parlors and all these other things. And I mean, last time I looked at it, he had over 500,000 viewers on Facebook who've been watching this thing.
Wow.
So and it's growing. I mean, so he really has he needs a platform to be the kind of guy he is. And when you have 20, 25,000 members and maybe 100,000 who watch him every Sunday morning at newbirth.org and hear his message, and he's young. He's 48 years old, and so he has a long time ahead of him. He's both political, and he was able to address the financial concerns that needed to be addressed. This church is the largest black church in America in terms of geography. It has over 250 acres of land.
Really?
When I interviewed him, I was saying, look, we've got, we're huge. We can, I think the cathedral, the chapel holds about 6,000 or 7,000, and then they have many other rooms on the side. But there was a lot of land that was still to be used, and we had a considerable amount of debt, and he walked in with a PowerPoint plan, and we had 5 finalists, then down to 2, and then I helped shepherd him through with Tommy, and we made sure that we felt very comfortable he was the right guy, and he has been. So he's taking the land and he's saying, look, let's put a solar farm out here and let's take care of our energy needs and sell it back to the company. I mean, thinking, I've always said, and I've spoken at many churches personally.
Yeah.
I've always said the title should be pastor and CEO of blank blank church. Church is a business and needs to be run like a business.
Wow. I love it. I love it. Well, we answered that one for the Saints, but the funny bone in me has another question, Constance. I'm gonna drop it on him real quick and see what he does. I need to know, if you had to choose your favorite comedian, who do you choose between Steve Harvey and Eddie Murphy?
I think that if you're looking at raw funny, I think they're fairly similar. I think Murphy has a lot of talent from an acting standpoint. I'm actually good friends with Steve Harvey, and
of course.
I've enjoyed being one of his speakers. He brings kids once a year, young boys who don't have fathers, to his facility in Dallas. He actually brought me in to be one of the speakers. I think highly of him. I've seen his capabilities. He's a very, very funny guy, but he's also a strong-minded businessman, and
yes, he is.
He's been able to sustain, frankly, longer than Eddie, a constant growth from his TV shows to the game shows to his stand-up to his radio. So he's a hardworking guy, and I think he's probably much more of a person who takes this whole thing seriously. He's a family guy, a religious guy. So he has a lot of the strong attributes. So Steve is a good guy. I like Steve, and plus he's been to my castle in the Bahamas, and I have to tell you a funny story. He was on the boat with his wife, and they pointed out my property, and it literally looks like a castle. It's called Robert's Castle on the beach, and he pointed to it and said, "Hey, I know the guy who lives there." And she said, "You don't know who that is." Because he told me this story. So yeah, it's Mike Roberts. He's a friend of mine, and we joked about it. But so I like him a lot. I think he's a great guy. Plus, he likes to fish. The only problem with him is he's an Omega and I'm a Kappa. So we bump heads every once in a while.
So when COVID-19 is over, you're back in the castle. You got to give an invitation to me and Robert. For sure.
I will. Both of you guys will be invited. I have an annual party that we'll invite you to on the evening.
You're there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That will be an honor.
In the feed, someone asked, why was he charging for the COVID-19 test? Was Jamal Bryant charging for those? Are you talking to?
No. See, that's how things. What happened was he was given, I think, 1,000 tests to pass out, but what was not indicated in that was in order for that test to be studied was a cost that he knew nothing about. He was blindsided by that.
Mm.
And so it was just, you got those conspiracy people out here who look to injure
Yeah.
the reputation of a good person. Uh, uh, and listen, with all the wonderful things he's done since he's been there for just a little over a year now, I mean, he's sets up programs to feed thousands of people. He set up programs that have dealt with getting um, those who are in jail for little or no for minor crimes, but couldn't afford
Right.
even tickets, who couldn't afford bonds. He raised money for that. When Bennett College was about to close because they didn't have enough money for their endowment, he started a process. They needed $5 million, and in a month and a half, with his work, his leadership, and the support of companies through him, uh, on the Friday that they had to have the 5 million, they didn't worry about it because by then they had raised 9 million.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, this brother
A
has
lot of great
done
work.
some amazing things. When it was for the day for Super Bowl down in Atlanta, instead of the Super Bowl, what they did was they went around and picked up the homeless and brought them to the church and fed them, gave them haircuts, dressed them, and helped them with psychological assistance.
I
I mean,
love that.
and this is just this is just within the first few months of his pastoral responsibilities.
Well, listen, Dr. Roberts, you need to on the record help Jamal to get on the show because there's some people in the feed who are asking questions. There are a lot of misnomers out there, but we like for him in his own voice to be able to speak to our audience, which is very, very diverse. So if you could make that happen, that would be great. So my second thing is here's
Consider
my
it done.
question. Yeah,
Consider it done. You
thank
pick
you,
the
sir.
date, and I'm sure he'll do it.
Yes, sir. So here's my question: because you're in politics, because you're the deal maker, right? And you're so smooth with it. So Joe Biden is the Democratic candidate. He says he's going to choose a woman as his running mate. So my question for you is: if you had to recommend, if you had to advise in the background, would it be Stacey Abrams or Kamala Harris?
For me, I think it would be Kamala.
Great question.
And I think
Great question.
that's because you guys are out there in California. You probably would prefer that, right?
Yeah.
I'm not playing to you, but but I mean, she is the state senator. She has, you know, indicated a willingness to be a president. So at least she uh, has been out in the community. Uh,
Sure.
I think she's a sister who, like most of our sisters, when they get out there and they're strong, uh, people will try to take them down and say negative
Yeah.
things. But
Yeah.
she's she is a sister. I mean, she's an AKA. So I mean, it's not like she's hasn't gone through the
The
black
burning
experience.
sands.
Yeah. So I mean, I wish her well. But yeah, between the two, I would prefer that.
You
Yeah.
know
A good
what? So
choice. Good
yeah,
choice.
there are people in the feed, and I know for sure because I have some family in Atlanta and in Georgia and some towns you never even heard of. They're really, really big on Stacey Abrams, and so she has a huge following. She's very articulate, and she has shown an aspiration to do it. I like the other brother. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Is not even a hot seat question, but the gentleman down in Florida. I want to say his name is Gilliam.
Yes.
Uh,
Right.
what are your thoughts on him? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but we need to have more representation that has this platform. And I just like to know, is this somebody we should support or do you have any relationship with them at all?
I don't. This is the brother that got caught up with the meth, with the crystal
Unfortunately.
meth. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh, I mean, those things tag you, and it's hard to
Hard to escape. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
hard to escape. But listen, there's so many talented, qualified leaders out here that we just have to financially embrace them so that
sure.
they can rise and become get on the national platform in the future.
Yeah. I love it.
So you recommend for the average person, entrepreneur, your recommendation is we have to have a seat at the table. We need to at least be on some type of boards or commissions, things where we have a voice, where we're making a difference. You recommend that for most entrepreneurs? Because it seems like that was part of your strategy in helping you to grow your businesses.
What I found is a lot of the public boards don't really take entrepreneurs and put them on the board. They usually play with safe black folks. Usually, you're going to find people on the boards that are black. You could do your own research, who are, they may be over the Urban League, they may be over the NAACP, they may be professors or deans of colleges. Whereas the other members of the board are actual business people. So, for whatever reason, I think that, and I think I know the reason. The reason is when they're choosing candidates for the board, they only see those types of folks. I'm not, saying anything negative about them. I'm just saying that because of their persona in the community, they're perceived as being, safe, and it'll serve their diversity game plan.
Yeah, but Dr. Roberts, safe doesn't always push the needle forward. And while you were talking, my comedic brain just kicked in one more time. So if you were in trouble, Dr. Roberts, I know your blackboard is vast, right? I know you got a Ambrosio folks you can call. But if I gave you two folks to call, if you were shown up in trouble and you need some backing and you needed to help get you out of jam, who are you calling? The Reverend Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton? Who you calling?
I'd call.
I know them both.
Well, I know them both too.
I'm talking about you.
I do, but in fact, Al, I did help keep him out of jail. I did. True story. Yeah, but I like them both. I mean, Al is where he needs to be right now, and is probably a good person to acknowledge. So, yeah. Well, I have to tell the whole story. I mean, what happened was there was a protest in St. Louis that Al came in and they were blocking some highways and they all got arrested. So I had heard he was coming in, and he's been in my hotel. We're friends, and I decided I better go down there because I had helped make some of the judges, and I had to go see who was in front of it. So I went down and did a sidebar with the judge, and everything worked out just fine. Let's put it that way.
No, let me talk to you for a second.
Yeah. James Moore said, "Who don't he know besides me?"
Yeah. Right. No.
Well, membership certainly has its privileges, and you had. If I didn't catch anything else from you, Dr. Roberts, relationships are key. There are a lot of people who have money in the bank, but they don't have a seat at the table. And without those relationships, being on the golf course, being connected politically, being in a place where you're part of a major national organization like the FCC, it's impossible for you to move the needle and to, more importantly, be able to actually make the kind of moves that you have made with a whisper. And I love the fact how you said, rich folks make noise and wealthy people whisper. I mean, that part, if somebody doesn't put that in the feed, that is so true. And it's indicative of, I know you know Dr. Frazier, so I always quote him, and I try to sound really intelligent by just repeating what I've heard him tell me. He said that I would rather have $5,000 in a paper bag rather than to have a Louis Vuitton bag that costs $2,000 with 15 cents in it. I mean, the math is simple.
Right.
Let me just say about it. I'm doing his show on the 31st, and I've been a part of his Frazier Network for many, many years. I love the guy. There's another phrase that I like to use, and you can quote this one too, and that is, there's something wrong when you see a brother driving a Land Rover but has a landlord.
Run that back one more time, Dr. Roberts. Say it again.
I said, there's something wrong when you see a brother with a Land Rover
And
but
a
has a
landlord.
landlord.
Okay.
That part right there.
Dr.
Well,
Frazier?
see, you
Oh
know,
my goodness.
I always tell people this, brother. You know, I told you I represented the projects for 8 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that means I got. I said, don't let the light skin fool you. I got plenty of street cred. So, so we want to make sure that people understand that, you know, it's okay to be. George talks about it being a gangster, but it's in the economic terms. You know, it's not a gangster, but a gangsta with an
Gangsta.
A.
It's a whole, gangsta is
A whole
different
different
than
thing.
gangster. Don't get it twisted. Yes.
Right, right.
You know, the thing I
Wow.
love about you, Dr. Roberts, is that not only are you successful, the most important thing is that you give back. And you give back by sharing your information, share your knowledge. You're always trying to bring other people with you. I see that. I see how you move. And, you know, a lot of people think that you're untouchable, unapproachable, but you're not. And so thank you for being you. Thank you for being a down to earth brother, even though you have acquired all these things, even though you have accomplished all these things, even though you have a castle in the Bahamas on your own island, you are still that brother that's not afraid to help somebody else. And that's more important than any amount of money that you could have. That's more important than anything that you could have accomplished in this life. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for being you. We
Yes, sir.
appreciate it. Yeah, it means everything to our community. And we need more people like you that are operating on that level, but are not afraid to give back in the way that you have. So thank you.
No, well, thank you too. And again, I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to speak. There are many others that need the forum to work through you to get their words out.
Absolutely.
And I'll help you with Dr. Bryant and maybe give you some more suggestions as well. You want to get some more millennials to talk a little bit as well.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I just want, you know, people to really take this coronavirus issue seriously.
Yeah.
You know, the great phrase that I use and it's going around now is, you know, you can either stay 6 feet apart or plan to be 6 feet under.
Makes sense.
Yeah, you can absolutely drop the mic with that, and that is so poignant and so true, and more people need to hear that, which is why Constance and I have this platform, have this forum, to speak to so many people who are getting misinformation. You would be well, you already know how much misinformation that's out there. Anybody with a Facebook Live and a voice can say and spew all kinds of misnomers out there, but you know, just for the entrepreneur who's still been plugged in. Our listenership is really high. We're getting comments in the feed, and they all love you, Dr. Roberts. So,
They all love you.
yeah, with some closing words and the wisdom that you have shared with us thus far, are there any closing comments that you would like to give to every entrepreneur, whether it's a tip, a trick, or just wisdom, please?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I want to know what's next for you. What are you working on next? What's next for Dr. Roberts?
Well, I'm looking into the digital world. I'm looking at, for example, you know, how do I take even my hotel in Detroit, knowing that the basis for business in a hotel would be conventions, sporting events, conventions, conferences, um, concerts, family reunions. Well, when is that going to be back? You know?
Right.
And so, you know, I have to look at, and I ask people always to think about, look at your business because the future is going to require you to be innovative.
Yeah.
You're going to have to consider, well, maybe the best use for this is to convert it into an apartment building. Who knows? I have to look at all of the considerations and weigh them. Let me just say this, a couple of things in conclusion. You know, frequently what I find, you know, people use words, and words can be a little tricky. For example, uh, I coined a word in my book. It's called an actionaire. We have the International Order of Actionaires. An actionaire is one who takes their dreams, their ideas, their vision, their passion, and they pursue them with courage and confidence and bravado. Now, I know we all have ideas, we all have dreams, but what's the first thing you have to do when you have a dream? You have to wake up.
Mm.
Then you have to sit up and you have to stand up and you have to pursue your dream. Your dream. You have to pursue your dream. And in our community, we'll have Aunt Sadie who will say, "Well, boy, be careful about being an entrepreneur because you know what happened to Uncle Tyrone when he tried that."
Yeah.
Well, when you wake up and you sit up and you stand up, sometimes you have to even tell your family members to shut up and get out of your way. You have to be able to have courage and confidence to be an actionaire. Now, frequently I ask the question, how many of you think outside of the box? Most people raise their hands, right? But then I spank you for doing it. Because if you're thinking outside the box, doesn't that presume that you are in a box? And if you're in a box, what's the size of your box? In other words, how have you limited yourself without realizing that that's what you've done?
Mm.
So I tell people all the time, what would your life be like if you could eliminate the fear of failure? So let's break that down. 2 words. First word, fear. Fear is just a mental construct. It's not of nature. You were not born with it. You were born perfect. You had no fear. You've only allowed this to get into your psyche, like words into your psyche. Like I'm thinking outside the box when in fact that let's assume I'm in a box.
Right.
Second word, fear. Fear is uh, again. I'm sorry. That's still the first word. Fear is still a mental construct. Second word is failure. Okay, failure. I submit to you that needs to no longer be in your vocabulary. Why do I say that? Well, what is failure in today's terms? Well, some people might say you got a divorce, you failed in marriage. Your business didn't make it, you failed in business. Well, every day when you wake up, you're given 86,400 seconds. 86,400 seconds, that's 24 hours. This is an existential concept. The moment you think of the moment, it's already gone. So you have to use every moment to its fullest extent. So if you have a business that didn't quite make it, was it a failure? Or was it a business where the outcome wasn't as you would have liked, but you learned from it? You gained from it. The marriage issue, you gained from it. You lose in a sport, you gain from it. You learned something from everything that may not have gone the way you would have liked. So therefore, let's eliminate that term in our minds and our vocabulary. Let's don't ever see ourselves as ever failing at anything, but gaining some kind of experience from that moment in which things took place.
Oh, Doc.
So to be an actionaire, you have to be a no box thinker.
Mm-hmm. No box thinker.
You have to be a dreamer who wakes up.
Dreamer who wakes up.
And you have to eliminate the fear of failure.
Eliminate the fear of failure.
And you take those combinations, and you'll be amazed at how you will shift your trajectory in life.
Wow.
You will become the full person that you were placed on earth to be. And we all have a purpose. We have purposes. We all have purposes, many purposes. So I say to you, use those 86,400 seconds. Use every moment to its fullest extent. Enjoy life. Enjoy becoming prosperous and recognizing that you are very unique. You are one of a kind, and you have a tremendous responsibility to give back to your community and utilize all that you have within you to become the most successful person. And when you become that most successful person, give back. And one last thing, write a book. You have a book inside of you. You have your story, you have your experiences. It doesn't have to be 100 pages. It can be 10, 15, 20 pages. But once you put that down and you let others recognize from your experiences things you learn, All you're doing is helping the next generation.
Amen.
I was in Ghana just last uh, December. You know, last December was the last month that represented the 400-year
Yeah.
return. 400 years ago in 1619, the first slaves hit the Americas.
Yeah.
When I went to Ghana, I was invited to go there. It's not my first trip, it was my second. And while I was there, they installed me as a king of economic development for the Ada region in Ghana.
Wow.
And when I went to Sierra Leone, they made me a paramount chief in Sierra Leone.
Mm.
Now, here's the interesting side of my story. When I went to the dungeons in Ghana and I saw where our ancestors were enslaved, when they were captured and they were placed in an environment where the floors were dirt and the only place where they could, to handle their bowels and there was a little cut in the dirt, and every day the slave directors would pour water to wash all of the crap away, and they may have been there for months, and then they went through the door of no return, and then they ended up on a slave ship, and then they landed here, and you sit there and you can't decide if you're going to be mad, angry, so many emotions, and I want us to consider this for a moment, that it would have been very easy for them to have chosen suicide.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
But it was those who chose life, those who chose to go through the indignities, those who chose to go through this,
Yeah.
who made it possible for us to live and breathe today.
Right.
Those are our ancestors.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So the question becomes, what are we doing now, as they did 400 years ago, to survive and make things possible for us to exist, to even live? What are we doing now that 400 years from now, when those are looking at us as ancestors and saying, here's the pivotal point, here's where Black folks in America made a shift. They recognized the relationship with their ancestors and their relatives in Africa. They started to reach and create a connection. The diaspora connected with the motherland. We saw value, we saw importance in a country that had more of the most natural minerals, gold, diamonds in the world. And we're sitting here in oil, and we're sitting here ready today to begin to make connections and do something with our
Beautiful.
brothers and sisters over there. And then
Beautiful.
400 years from now, let's hope that there'll be a picture of us hanging on the wall saying, hey, it was this member of our family who did something to allow
That's
us to
legacy.
be who we are now.
That's legacy.
Yes.
What do you want your legacy? Well, before I ask you that last question, did you do the DNA, African ancestry DNA with Gina Page?
Yes, I
What
did.
country?
Sierra Leone.
Me too,
I'm
brother.
are
Brother.
you, are
Yeah.
you Mende?
Yes, Mende. Yes.
Okay, well, let me tell you quickly my Sierra Leone story. When I left Ghana to go to Sierra Leone, I went there because I had given a speech in Miami, and the consulate from Sierra Leone was there, and he had spoken. And when I stood up and spoke and looked at him, I said, well, I'm Mende. He almost fell out of his chair. He couldn't believe it. He said, the president is Mende.
Wow.
And then, so they invited me to come over, and I went to your island and my island. It's called Banff.
Okay.
And they took me there.
We have an.
And to my surprise, uh, they had already researched me, and then they made me a chief.
Wow.
So you will address me as Nene in Ghana,
All right,
and
Nene.
Nene, Nene. It's one of many titles I have, but interestingly enough, it's real. When you go over
Yeah.
there, it's
I
real.
can't wait. I
Our
can't wait.
leadership and who we are. Ibra Elbra, by the way, is investing over there and is Mende at the same location. So
Really?
he's also a member of your family,
All right.
your
All
tribe.
right. What do you want your legacy to be, Dr. Roberts?
Well, I think first, I mean, my legacy has to be uh, an example of being, a person who made uh, hundreds of millions of dollars. Yes, but more importantly, the question is, how did I raise my four babies?
Mm.
Uh, Now they are, as I said, as busy as I was, we made sure that they were getting properly educated and they're good people, they're good kids. Uh, they have now produced eight grandchildren, all uh, eight and under age wise. So it's a cluster of it's a gaggle of kids when they all come to the castle in the Bahamas. With 10 bedrooms, it worked out fine. Everybody can have a place to hang out. Uh, so I would say, children is probably the legacy that is number one, and being an example of a father, which is supersedes really everything else, because we have the responsibility. I was there when each one of those children and their grandchildren came out, and there's a certain sense of responsibility that you must have
Yeah.
uh, to be responsible for that life. And so I say to you, the legacy is really in the children, and they're all very good people. Married well. In fact, one little point. Uh, my daughter, who my youngest, uh, I met a fellow who was a playwright. His name is Jacarius Johnson. Some of you may know his plays.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
He's very well known. He's a Tyler Perry level guy,
yeah.
and he was brought to me when I was at my hotel in Houston, I think. Yeah, and then I liked the cat, and I took him over with me to my hotel in Dallas, and we went to the NBA All Star game together. And he was doing very well and had written several plays. I mean, his plays are Broadway level type plays. I mean, he
Yeah.
tours and he does a great job, Jacarius Johnson. And I want people to look up JacariusJohnson.com because he just created his own Netflix channel very recently.
What's the channel?
You would go to Jacarius, that's JE apostrophe CARYOUS Johnson, and you type in, and all of his plays are there, and you can actually rent the plays and watch them, over his own new network.
Okay.
Entertainment, I think it is actually. So I'll make the story quick. At any rate, I really attached myself to him. He was a nice guy. And my daughter was in her last year of law school, and she was a specialist in dispute resolution. She's written a book and she does a podcast as well. And her name is Megan, by the way, Megan Roberts Johnson.
Okay.
So I introduced them by phone, and I handed because he had a little dispute. I said, well, maybe my daughter, who's getting her master's as well as her Juris Doctorate in dispute resolutions, and they got on the phone. They didn't get off the phone. They burned up about an hour and a half of my phone, and they kept going and got to know each other, and then eventually married. There are
Wow.
those who would say that it was an arranged marriage, but I only say that as an example of what a father has to do to look out for his daughters, and it's just important to play a role in the families and set an example that's a positive example for them.
Beautiful.
That part. Well, I cannot dispute any word that you said as a dad of three myself, Dr. Roberts. It is certainly important that we have legacy and that we create a legacy that will go on long beyond our years. And I love how you made the connection to the motherland. Constance has always talked about I haven't done it yet because I don't know what my mix will be because I got so much going on in my family. Both my parents are Black, but I know down the road, Master was in some bedrooms that he shouldn't have been in. Nonetheless, my comment to you is that I can appreciate what you have meant to this community, what you mean, more importantly, to your family. But it is incumbent upon us to continue what we learned from you today, and to each one teach one and continue that. And I'm so, so grateful to have this time, this moment. I don't know how many seconds you said are in each day. 8,640?
86,000.
86,000.
600.
640. Well, sir,
24 hours.
24 hours. Yes, sir. Well, I don't know the math on what we've done so far, Constance, but we appreciate your time that you took out of your day to
Yes.
speak with us, because we've all been so richly blessed. We've learned and we've laughed. So we love to do both of those things. And we also learn.
Copious notes.
Yes. If you want to know who owns two jets in the family, you are looking at live and in living color, Dr. Michael Roberts.
Well, we've sold.
Make sure you pick up his book.
They've been sold as part of the protection of the 2008 downside. So I like to be clear that those experiences you learn from, but you also have to sometimes let things go.
Absolutely.
To be successful as well.
Absolutely. The name of your book is, and by the way, when you said that we should buy your book from a Black store, I'm so sorry. I got my book from Amazon. We can't get anything right now, but what's the name of your book?
Thanks, Constance.
So everybody can know.
I appreciate both of you guys. Keep going and doing what you do. It's very important. You serve the community that needs to be served, and you guys are good folks. We appreciate it. Nice meeting you, and maybe one day I'll be back.
You will.
We'll see you in October, right? We'll see him in October. Are you going to be with Dr. Frazier?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll see you in October. Yeah, and I'll be on Dr. Frazier's show next month. But I want one more time the name of your book. The name of your book, so everybody can have it.
Sure. Action Has No Season is one of them, and the other one is the same title. Action Has No Season 2.0.
All right.
You can see them on Amazon if they just type in Mike Roberts in the name of the book. Like I said, any Black bookstore can do the same thing and order for you, but of course most of them are closed. So let's just do what we can and support our businesses where we can.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much. You guys have a blessed afternoon, evenings in some places. Peace out.
Take care. Ciao.
All right.